Very dangerous to be a Russian right now on the ground in Ukraine. The HX-2 essentially finishes the flight on its own and flies itself in sort of a kamikaze attack. This HX-2, or this X-wing drone, is as I like to call it because of its resemblance to Star Wars, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, really shows in this footage Ukraine using it to attack Russian targets. In this most recent footage, the Ukrainian operators have a screen, and what they're doing is they're selecting a target with a little red box around a Russian supply vehicle. And then the HX-2 essentially finishes the flight on its own and flies itself in sort of a kamikaze attack into the Russian vehicle and destroys it. And it's quite fascinating to watch, really because Russia is very good with electronic warfare and jamming. And what would normally happen is Russia will try to disconnect the link between the drone and the operator. And once that happens, the drone usually goes dumb and crashes like a normal loitering munition. But in the case of the HX-2, which has this onboard narrow AI, which is trained to recognize Russian vehicles, it can actually finish the mission completely on its own, completely disconnected from the Ukrainian operator entirely. And that's really what this footage shows, and it's fascinating to watch. The HX-2 is made by a German company called Helsing. I think they're based in Munich. It's a cruciform drone that has 4 motors, and it weighs about 12 kilograms, can fly about 100 kilometers. And the reason they have this X-wing configuration is to increase stability during flight. It makes it easier for the Ukrainians to control it and fly it. We see a lot of marketing footage from a lot of defense manufacturers, whether it's here in the United States or it's defense manufacturers in Europe. We see a lot of highly polished, very good-looking marketing videos of their newest weapon system in action. They're very slickly produced. They have a great marketing department. But the beauty of this real Ukrainian footage is that it's showing this weapon system in action in a very authentic way. You're seeing the Ukrainians, what challenges they're having with it. You're seeing the joy when they score a hit on a Russian target. And so it's sort of easy to get caught up in the joy that they're feeling and some of that authenticity that they're communicating through this video. The drone is supposed to have a range of about 100 kilometers, but in real world conditions, they found that it's more realistically about 70 kilometers. But I think the most interesting tech inside the HX-2 is the AI decision engine, which is allowing it to really fight through that jamming. And I say that as such a huge selling point because there are many other drones, or there are many other loitering munitions from other manufacturers that just fail when they encounter this Russian electronic warfare, because it severs that link between the operator and the drone itself, which could be as far as 50 or 60 or 70 kilometers away. It's very dangerous to be a Russian right now on the ground in Ukraine along the line of contact, probably even 100 to 150 kilometers behind the line of contact into Russian-held territory, simply because there are so many tools that Ukraine has available. Right now, Ukraine is experiencing what I would call a drone overmatch in some areas, in probably most areas along the front. They have an advantage right now in drones, which is fairly important. Eventually, the ultimate manifestation of these types of loitering munitions and these types of drones from an autonomy perspective using artificial intelligence, I think that within probably the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see just massive amounts of these types of drones being used in a defensive picket line, if you will, that could prevent some kind of incursion along, let's say, NATO's eastern flank. Imagine having these drones hidden along the entire border that Finland has with Russia. So many, many hundreds of kilometers hidden in storage containers. And once satellites detect that Russian armor has begun to cross the border, these AI-powered drones wake up, they take off, and they start loitering around, looking and hunting for targets. And that to me is really the only way we can move forward. We simply can't. We don't have enough tanks. We don't have enough of human resources. We don't have enough hardware to just sit at the border and wait for Putin to move west. So I think the future looks like these exact loitering munitions and these exact drones patrolling vast areas of the frontier between NATO and Russia that can stop any type of future incursion. The performance is very interesting, and I had just made a video about this a few weeks ago about an exercise in Estonia that Helsing had some of their HX-2s on site. The American soldiers were using some of these HX-2s in Estonia, just practicing with them, seeing how they would respond to jamming in a real world simulated exercise. And what was interesting about this is that the Americans had a set of reconnaissance drones on site, and they had a set of attack drones on site. And so they had the HX-2 Helsing attack drones and the reconnaissance drones, whose only job is to fly up and look around and be able to classify targets and identify targets so that then the attack drones can go and attack them. What they found, and I don't want to mention the manufacturer of these reconnaissance drones because they've really failed and were unable to withstand some of the electronic warfare and some of the jamming that was going on at this exercise. And so what the American soldiers ended up doing is they ended up using the Helsing HX-2, the attack drone, to do the reconnaissance because the Helsing was so resilient and so resistant to some of the electronic warfare that was happening at this exercise. Between Ukraine and Russia, they are absolutely constantly learning from each other. I would put my money on the Ukrainians for being able to engineer solutions more quickly, simply because the Russian military bureaucracy is so corrupt, or it's so difficult to get funded. But when you're as decentralized as the Ukrainians, and this is the way Russia is really moving with a lot of its command and control, is you're able to innovate very quickly, almost like MacGyver army. They can innovate to changes on the battlefield extremely fast. And yeah, the Russians are adapting, and they're learning how to counteract some of the tools that Ukraine is implementing. There was a story, I believe it was from Defense Express about a month ago, that the Russians were starting to paint their military trucks as zebras, because putting black and white stripes all over these trucks, they thought was going to confuse the AI's vision when they're flying around in these drones, and that AI strike drone like the HX-2 will get confused and not be able to see or recognize that it's looking at a truck. And the reason for this is because these AI drones are trained on thousands and thousands of images of what a Russian truck looks like, and nowhere in that database is one that's painted like a zebra. And so the Russians tried that, and it didn't work at all, because the AI still has the shape. It doesn't need. Some AI drones have thermal vision, and they can see heat, and the color of the paint of the truck doesn't matter at all. And so it is interesting that the Russians are trying to adapt to something like the HX-2. They failed in that particular case, but absolutely, I think we're going to start to see Russia iterate more and more on how to sort of counteract some of these tools from Ukraine.